The evening hall was filled with soft light and quiet music. Crystal lamps hung from the high ceiling, and polished floors reflected the glow like still water. People in expensive suits and long dresses moved slowly, holding glasses and smiling in careful ways. This was a charity event meant for the wealthy and influential. Every detail was planned to show status and power. Near the entrance, a woman stood with a simple black uniform and flat shoes. She was part of the temporary staff hired to help guide guests and clear tables. No one asked her name. Most people did not even look at her face. She kept her hands folded and her eyes low, doing her job quietly. She had learned long ago that silence made life easier. At the center of the hall stood a grand piano, black and shining. It sat on a small stage, waiting for the scheduled performer later in the night. The piano drew attention like a crown. Guests pointed at it and talked about famous musicians they had heard or sponsored. To them, it was not just an instrument but a symbol of culture and class. The woman noticed the piano the moment she entered the hall. Her steps slowed whenever she passed it. She tried not to stare, but her eyes returned again and again. Something tight formed in her chest. She had not touched a piano in many years, yet her hands remembered the shape of the keys. She pressed her fingers together gently, as if to calm them. One of the most important guests arrived late. The Tycoon was known for his wealth and sharp tongue. He had built an empire and enjoyed reminding others of it. When he entered, the room shifted. People turned toward him. Laughter grew louder, and conversations changed direction. He walked with confidence, as if the hall belonged to him. As he moved closer to the stage, he noticed the woman standing near the piano, adjusting a small sign. She was simply making sure guests did not step onto the stage too early. To him, her presence there seemed amusing. He slowed his steps and looked her up and down, with a loud voice meant to entertain. He asked what she was doing so close to the piano. The woman froze. She answered softly that she was only doing her job. Her voice barely carried past the first row of guests. The Tycoon laughed and made a joke about how anyone could stand near a piano, but that playing it was another matter. He added that instruments like that were meant for trained people, not for staff who cleaned tables. His words were wrapped in humor, but the meaning was clear. Several guests laughed with him, eager to share the moment. The woman felt heat rise to her face. She did not respond. She had learned not to. Speaking would only draw more attention. She stepped back slightly, keeping her eyes on the floor. The piano was now just a few steps away, yet it felt farther than ever. The Tycoon continued talking, enjoying the attention. He joked about how the piano probably cost more than her yearly wages. More laughter followed. Someone nearby added another comment, and the group shared a brief moment of amusement at her expense. What they did not see was the storm behind her calm face. Inside her, memories stirred. Long hours in small practice rooms, cold mornings, the sound of a piano echoing through empty halls. She pushed the thoughts away. This was not the time. This was not her place. She remembered a different kind of room from long ago. It was not grand, but it was filled with sound. As a child, she had sat on a worn bench, feet barely touching the floor, playing until her fingers hurt. Back then, people listened. Back then, music had been her world. A sudden voice from across the hall announced that the evening program would begin soon. Guests were asked to take their seats. The laughter faded, and people moved toward their tables. The Tycoon walked away, satisfied, already focused on his next conversation. The woman stayed near the edge of the hall. Her task now was to assist quietly, bringing water and guiding late guests. No one spoke to her about what had happened. To them, it was a small joke already forgotten. To her, it was a wound reopened. As the hall settled, she looked once more at the piano. The lights above it seemed brighter now. She wondered who would play later. She wondered if the keys still felt the same. Her fingers twitched again, and she pressed them into her palms to stop the movement. A guest nearby whispered about the scheduled performer being delayed. Another mentioned that the program might change. The woman heard these words without meaning to. A strange feeling passed through her, part fear, part longing. She quickly shook her head. None of that mattered. She was there to work, nothing more. An older man seated near the aisle noticed her standing still. He asked politely if she was all right. She nodded and gave a small smile, the kind she used often. He accepted it and turned back to the stage. The music had not yet started, but the room felt tense, as if waiting for something. The woman took a slow breath. She told herself to focus on the present. This world was not her world anymore. That life was gone. Still, The sound of the piano lived inside her. Even in silence, she could hear it. Each note was clear in her mind, strong and gentle at the same time. She wondered if it would ever leave her. From across the room, the Tycoon glanced back toward the stage. His eyes passed over her without recognition. To him, she was invisible again. He smiled, confident, unaware that the moment he had laughed it was not finished. The woman straightened her shoulders and returned to her duties. But something had changed. The quiet pain in her chest had turned into a steady resolve. She did not know why or how, but she felt that the night was not over yet. The piano waited, silent and patient, and so did she. The woman moved slowly between the tables, collecting empty glasses and straightening napkins. Her face looked calm, but her mind was far away. The moment near the piano kept replaying in her head. The laughter, the careless words, she told herself. She had heard worse before, yet this time it felt heavier. Maybe because the piano was so close. As she worked, memories slipped through her thoughts without warning. She remembered being very young, sitting on a bench that was too high for her legs. Someone had placed thick books under her feet so she could reach the pedals. Her fingers were small, but they moved with confidence. Even then, music felt natural to her, like breathing. In those days, her life had been simple. Wake up early, practice for hours, eat quickly, practice again. Her teacher had been strict and demanding, never smiling during lessons. But after each session, when she was alone, the woman used to smile to herself. Playing made sense when nothing else did. The sound of plates clinking pulled her back to the present. She handed a tray to another staff member and stepped aside. The hall felt warmer now, filled with low voices and quiet expectation. People were waiting for the performance to begin. She wondered how many of them truly loved music and how many were there, only to be seen. She thought of the day everything changed. It had started like any other. She had practiced early and planned to leave for a small competition later that afternoon. Then a phone call came. The words on the other end had not made sense at first. By the time she understood, her hands were shaking too much to play. After that day, music became painful. The piano reminded her of what she had lost and what she could not save. Life moved fast and without mercy. Bills had to be paid, food had to be bought. Dreams were set aside quietly, without ceremony. Years passed like that. She worked different jobs. She kept her head down. Whenever she heard piano music in public places, she left the area if she could. If she could not, she endured it in silence. Music still lived inside her, but she had locked it away. Tonight, that lock felt weak. The grand piano stood only steps away, glowing under the lights. It looked larger than any piano she had ever played, more perfect, more dangerous. She avoided looking at it, afraid of what might happen if she did. Across the room, the Tycoon sat with several guests, laughing easily. He spoke loudly, telling a story that drew attention. He seemed pleased with himself. The woman noticed how people leaned in when he talked. Power, she thought, made people deaf to kindness. A quiet announcement came through the speakers, informing guests that the scheduled performer was delayed due to travel issues. A small wave of disappointment passed through the room. Murmurs spread from table to table. The woman felt her heart beat faster. She did not know why. The words should have meant nothing to her. Still, her fingers tightened around the tray she was holding. An event coordinator hurried past her, speaking into a phone with clear worry in his voice. He looked stressed, glancing toward the stage and then at the audience. This event mattered. Important donors were watching. The woman lowered her eyes and stepped out of the way. She was not part of that problem, she reminded herself again. Not anymore. She moved toward the side wall, near a small service door. It was quieter there. She could breathe. She leaned slightly against the wall, closing her eyes for a brief moment. The smell of polished wood and clean fabric filled the air. When she opened her eyes, she saw the piano again. This time, she did not look away. She remembered a promise she once made to herself, spoken silently in a dark room after everyone else had left. She had promised that even if she never played in public again, she would never forget who she was. That promise had been hard to keep. A voice nearby startled her. An older woman from the staff asked if she could help with something. The woman shook her head gently and said she was fine. Her voice sounded steady, surprising even herself. As she returned to work, she noticed something else. A few guests were now discussing the delay with clear frustration. One man joked that perhaps anyone could play if the performer did not show. A few people laughed. The Tycoon overheard this and joined in. He glanced toward the piano and then toward the staff. his eyes stopping briefly on the woman. A smile crossed his face, the same mocking one as before. He said something under his breath to the group around him, and more laughter followed. The woman felt a familiar sting, but it was different now, less sharp, more focused. She took a slow breath and straightened her back. Inside her, the fear battled with something stronger, a sense of truth. She knew what she could do. She had always known. The world had taken many things from her, but not that. She did not move toward the piano, not yet. She simply stood there, feeling the weight of the moment settle. If nothing happened, she would go home after her shift, just like any other night. Life would continue. But if something did happen, everything could change. The lights dimmed slightly as the coordinator prepared to make another announcement. The room grew quiet. The woman felt the silence press against her ears. It was the same silence she used to feel just before playing her first note. Her hands no longer trembled. They rested calmly at her sides, somewhere deep inside. The music was already beginning. The room stayed quiet after the announcement. Guests shifted in their seats, unsure of what would happen next. The event coordinator walked onto the stage with a forced smile. He thanked everyone for their patience and explained again that the scheduled performer had been delayed. His voice carried a hint of worry that could not be fully hidden. He said they were working on a solution and asked for a few more minutes. Polite applause followed, but it sounded thin. Important people checked their watches. Some leaned back, clearly annoyed. From the side of the hall, the woman watched it all. Her heart beat steadily now, not fast. She felt strangely calm, as if her body had already made a decision before her mind had caught up. The coordinator stepped down from the stage and spoke urgently with a few staff members. They shook their heads. There was no backup performer, no recording planned. The piano sat there in silence, waiting. An older guest near the front spoke loudly enough for others to hear. He joked that maybe the piano should play itself. A few people laughed, but the sound quickly faded. The mood was turning uncomfortable. The Tycoon leaned forward in his seat. He enjoyed moments like this, when others felt uneasy. He raised his voice and said that perhaps they should invite someone from the staff to try. His tone made it clear he did not expect anything serious. More laughter followed, sharper this time. The woman felt every eye in the room move, even if they were not looking directly at her. She lowered her gaze. This was the moment where she usually disappeared. This was the moment where she stayed silent. But something inside her did not move back. The coordinator looked around the room, desperate. His eyes passed over the audience and then toward the side of the hall. They landed on the woman. He hesitated. She was staff. This was not part of the plan. Their eyes met for a brief second. In that second, he saw something unexpected. Not fear, not confusion, just a quiet steadiness. He stepped closer and spoke softly, asking if she had any experience with the piano. His question was careful, almost apologetic. He did not want to embarrass her further. The woman felt the weight of the room press down on her. She could hear her own breathing. She thought of all the reasons to say no. She thought of the years she had spent hiding. She thought of the laughter from earlier. Then she nodded. The movement was small, but it felt loud. The coordinator blinked, surprised. He asked again, just to be sure. She nodded once more. A ripple moved through the audience as people noticed what was happening. Whispers spread. Some smiled in disbelief. Others looked curious. The Tycoon leaned back, clearly amused. The coordinator offered her the chance to play something simple, just to fill the time. His voice carried hope mixed with doubt. The woman took a step forward, then another. Each step toward the stage felt heavy and light at the same time. She was aware of every sound, every breath, every face turned toward her. As she climbed the small steps to the stage, the lights felt warmer, brighter. The piano stood right in front of her now. Close enough to touch. She paused beside it. The room was silent. She could feel eyes on her back, on her hands, on her worn shoes. She placed her fingers lightly on the edge of the piano, grounding herself. The bench waited. She sat down slowly, adjusting her position without thinking. Her body remembered what to do. Her feet found the pedals naturally. She rested her hands above the keys, but did not play yet. She closed her eyes. In that moment, the years fell away. She was no longer in a grand hall surrounded by strangers. She was in a small room again, learning to listen, learning to feel. The Tycoon crossed his arms, still smiling. He expected a short, awkward attempt, something to joke about later. The woman took one deep breath. Her fingers moved. The first note was soft, almost too soft to hear, but it was clean, clear. The room leaned in without realizing it. She played the second note, then the third. The sound grew fuller, richer. Conversation stopped completely. Even the Tycoon's smile faded slightly. The woman's hands flowed across the keys with ease. There was no rush, no showing off, just control and feeling. Each note seemed placed with care. People shifted in their seats, drawn in. Some leaned forward. Others sat very still, afraid to break the moment. The piano filled the hall. Not loudly, but deeply. The sound reached places words could not. The woman opened her eyes as she played. She was fully present now. Fear had no place here. The coordinator stood at the side of the stage, stunned. This was no simple filler performance. This was something real. The Tycoon's laughter was gone. His face changed as he listened, confusion slowly replacing amusement. The music continued, steady and alive. The room that had once felt cold and judgmental now felt connected, breathing together. And the woman played on, unaware of how many lives she was touching with every note. The music flowed without pause. Each note seemed to carry a piece of her life, shaped by years of silence and struggle. Her hands moved with calm confidence, not rushed, not hesitant. The piano answered her touch as if it had been waiting only for her. The audience sat frozen. No one whispered now. No one checked their phone. Even the smallest movement felt too loud. The sound filled the hall and wrapped around everyone inside it. Some guests felt a tightness in their chest without knowing why. Others felt memories rise that they had not thought about in years. The music did not ask for attention. It simply took it. The woman's face remained calm, but her eyes showed something deeper. She was not performing for praise. She was speaking in the only language that had ever fully understood her. As the piece grew stronger, her fingers moved faster, then slowed again. She guided the sound gently, like guiding breath. There was pain in it, but also hope, loss, but also strength. A woman in the front row wiped her eyes quietly. She had not planned to feel anything tonight. She had come for appearances, for polite conversation. Now she felt exposed, as if the music had seen her clearly. The event coordinator stood with his hands clasped, barely breathing. He knew now that this moment would be remembered long after the event ended. He forgot about schedules and plans. None of that mattered anymore. Across the room, the Tycoon shifted in his seat. His confident posture slowly collapsed into stillness. He had expected entertainment. He had expected control. Instead, he felt something unfamiliar. Unease. He looked around and saw faces changed by the sound. People who usually hid behind smiles and status now showed real emotion. And at the center of it all was the woman he had laughed at. The music softened again. The room leaned closer, as if pulled forward by invisible hands. Every note landed gently, but with purpose. The woman's shoulders relaxed. She was no longer aware of who watched her. She was no longer aware of judgment. The piano and the sound were everything. She remembered moments from her past as she played. A small room with cracked walls. Long nights when her fingers hurt but her heart felt full. A time when she believed the world made sense through sound. The pain of losing that life had never fully left her. But now, it transformed into something else. Something clean. Something honest. The Tycoon cleared his throat softly, then stopped. The sound felt wrong in the space. He folded his hands and listened, truly listened. For the first time that night, the music reached its quiet peak. The woman slowed her hands, letting each note breathe. The hall seemed to breathe with her. When the final notes came, they did not crash or demand applause. They faded slowly, like a memory drifting away. Silence followed. It was deep and complete. No one moved. No one spoke. The sound of the last note still hung in the air, felt more than heard. The woman kept her hands on the keys for a moment longer. Then she lifted them gently and rested them in her lap. She opened her eyes for a heartbeat. Nothing happened. Then one person stood. Then another. Applause began softly, uncertain at first, then grew stronger, louder. It rolled through the hall like a wave. People rose to their feet, not because they felt they should, but because they could not remain seated. The woman stood slowly, unsure where to look. The sound surrounded her, filled her ears. She had forgotten what applause felt like. It was overwhelming. She bowed her head slightly, more out of instinct than pride. The event coordinator stepped onto the stage, his face open with emotion. He thanked her, his voice shaking. He did not try to add humor or control the moment. He simply spoke the truth. The applause continued. The Tycoon remained seated for a moment longer than the rest. His hands stayed still. His face was unreadable. Then, slowly, he stood and began to clap as well. His applause was not loud, but it was real. The woman noticed him then. Their eyes met briefly. She did not feel anger. She did not feel satisfaction. She felt something quieter, released. The room buzzed with energy now. People spoke in low voices, amazed. Some asked who she was. Others shook their heads, unable to explain what they had just experienced. The woman stepped away from the piano. Her legs felt weak, but she walked steadily. She returned to the side of the hall where she had stood before. For a moment, she thought she might cry, but the tears did not come. Instead, she felt light, as if something heavy had been set down at last. The piano stood behind her, silent again, but it no longer felt distant. The night was not over yet, and she sensed that neither was her story. The applause slowly faded, but the feeling it left behind stayed in the air. People did not rush to speak. Many sat back down, still processing what they had heard. The woman stood near the wall, her hands clasped in front of her, breathing evenly. She felt tired, but it was a good kind of tired, the kind that comes after honesty. The event coordinator approached her with care, as if afraid to break something fragile. He thanked her again, this time quietly, away from the stage. He said the evening had been saved, but she shook her head gently. She said she had only played. He asked if she would be willing to stay nearby in case the audience wanted to speak with her. She nodded, though she felt unsure. Attention had never been easy for her. Guests began to move toward her in small groups. Some spoke softly, choosing their words with care. Others could only say thank you. A few admitted they had never felt music like that before. She listened, smiling politely, answering simply. She did not explain her past. She did not need to. Across the hall, the Tycoon stood apart from his group. He watched the scene with a serious expression. The noise and laughter that usually followed him were gone. He waited until the crowd thinned before walking toward her. When he stopped a short distance away, she looked up. For a moment, neither of them spoke. He cleared his throat and said he owed her an apology. His voice was lower than before, stripped of humor. He admitted his words earlier had been thoughtless and wrong. He said he had judged too quickly. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, she nodded once. She said she accepted his apology. Her voice held no bitterness, just calm. The Tycoon seemed surprised by her response. He had expected anger or pride. Instead, he felt something close to humility. He thanked her again and stepped away, quieter than he had arrived. The woman returned to her place near the wall. The night continued, but it felt different now. Conversations were softer. Smiles were more real. Later, as guests began to leave, the coordinator approached her once more. He asked if she would consider playing at future events. He said people would want to hear her again. He spoke carefully, not wanting to pressure her. She did not answer right away. She looked toward the piano one last time. It stood silent under the lights, patient as ever. She said she would think about it. When her shift ended, she stepped outside into the cool night air. The city was quiet, streets glowing under streetlights. She walked slowly, letting the evening settle inside her. For the first time in many years, she did not feel the need to run from the sound of music. Instead, she felt open to it. Days passed, then weeks. The memory of that night did not fade. People spoke about it. Someone shared a recording taken on a phone. It traveled farther than she expected. Messages reached the coordinator. Requests followed. She was asked to play again. This time, she said yes. Her return to music was not sudden or dramatic. She practiced quietly, in small rooms, late at night. Her fingers were slower at first, her hands stiff, but the connection was still there, stronger than she remembered. Each time she played, she felt more whole. She did not chase fame. She chose places that felt right. Small halls, community spaces, places where people came to listen, not to be seen. And wherever she played, the same thing happened. People felt something real. As for the Tycoon, he attended one of her later performances. He sat in the back, unnoticed. He listened without speaking. When the music ended, he clapped with the rest, then left quietly. The woman never saw him again. Her life did not become perfect. There were still struggles, still doubts, but the piano was no longer locked away. She had learned something important that night. Talent does not belong to status. It does not answer to wealth or power. It lives where it lives, waiting for courage, and sometimes, all it takes is one moment to be heard.